right. Well, good morning and good afternoon. My name is Jason Flame, host of the Master Motivation Podcast. Listen, guys, if you've been waiting for us for a few minutes, I apologize. I mean, I think we're kind of used to this in show business, and we're used to this when it comes to interviews, but sometimes we have some technical difficulties. But we are here today, and I want to introduce my guest. This is a trailblazer right here. Karen Sheperd, the queen of kata, an actress, was the first #1 women's forms champion ever to be rated in Karate Illustrated and in Kick Illustrated, holding the title for 2 years in 1979 and 1980. Karen was the first woman to ever win grand champion at the U.S. Open in December of 1979. As a pioneer, Karen boldly fought to establish those ratings for women in hopes to entice more women to compete. Karen Sheperd retired from competition after winning the Diamond Nationals in 1981, defeating Cynthia Rothrock, Belinda Davis, and Lori Clapper to answer the call from Hollywood. Karen has graced the covers of every major martial arts magazine and has gratefully received numerous awards, including induction into Black Belt Magazine's Black Belt Hall of Fame. There's a lot more to talk about, but I'm going to let her tell you from her voice. Karen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. It's so great to be here. Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yeah, this is amazing. I love the opportunities to highlight and showcase the martial artists that really paved the way for all of us that continue to practice the martial arts. As a martial arts school owner, it's amazing that I get to pass on the legacy from so many great martial artists to my students. And I'm just here to help you tell your story. You've got a rich history in martial arts and in Hollywood. So let's just get rolling. Let's get started. So can you tell me a little bit about kind of, childhood growing up? And since this is a motivation show, I like to talk about challenges. And were there any challenges as a child that you had to overcome?
A lot. Yes. I was bullied. I was picked on. I would say that's probably one of the biggest challenges that affected my just the way that I am, the way I grew up. And it was, I really was beat up. I was pinned down to the ground and kids would pick on me. My dad was working 3 jobs at one time while he was putting himself through college, getting his PhD in special education at the University of Illinois. I was a little tiny kid. And so we were not wealthy. We were pretty poor, and my clothes were handmade. People saw my mother using food stamps at the store, and they just knew that we lived in student housing, which really was Quonset huts left over from World War II and the Korean War. They were not glamorous, and I had to walk to school by myself every day. And so, kids are cruel, and especially back then. And it really broke my confidence. Nobody back then did anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
But, that had to happen for me to get on my path. So I've come to embrace that as a gift. And we could talk about how I did that. But so I would say that's the biggest thing. Mm-hmm. And I had to kind of live in my own world and create dreams and goals, and to start to kind of reinvent myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love telling these stories because everybody sees the glamorous part of our lives, especially on social media and in the magazines and in movies. You think everybody's got it made, right? And I can relate. Growing up in a family that my father was a custom home builder, was in construction my whole life. And so there were times that it was really, really good. And there were times where, just like we lived in a 20-foot travel trailer with the 5 of us. We had food given to us by neighbors. We literally had to run a hose for water from our trailer to the neighbor. And, so many things like that. And I remember having hand-me-down clothes and going to school, feeling like everybody was looking at me and judging, right? And
Yes.
I don't know if they were really, but that feeling inside growing up, it still lasts with me now. Like you said, it made you who you are. You know, one of the things that I was able to do is I remember very vividly telling myself when I started my martial arts school, if I ever made it, right, if I ever got to the point where I could give back and to help people like my family, I absolutely would. And for many years, my wife and I have been able to provide Thanksgiving dinners and give back to our local food pantry. And so it's, you know, it's just a nice full circle moment to be able to grow from that, but then also remember how important it is to give back. So tell me more about how this paved the way for you, how this, you know, started your life and changed your life.
So my dad got his PhD. He succeeded. My dad, well, I have to back up just a little bit, and I won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but my grandfather. My grandfather came to this country from Russia with his father and his brothers, and they intended to set up the family in Colorado, and they worked for, they were sponsored by farmers. So they worked the fields of Colorado, and they intended to bring, they wanted the American dream, right? So they were, yes, on the boats. My grandfather learned how to speak like 4 languages while he took the boat trip. He learned English, Italian, French, and of course he spoke Russian. So, because he knew when he got to America that he had to assimilate and he wanted to be an American. And that's why my name is spelled differently. Like most people throw an A-R-D. I don't know if you're getting it backwards or not. I didn't have time to like mirror my.
No, it looks just right.
Yeah, oh good. So when he was at Ellis Island, they said, "What's your name?" He said, Sheperd. And they went, what? Okay, we'll put it down Sheperd. And they just spelled it phonetically. Because most people throw an H or an A in there or whatever. But so that's how he got, it was Shepard. That was his last name. But right off the bat at Ellis Island there, he just went with the name that they gave him, Sheperd. They converted it. So anyway, so they intended to send for his mother and sisters and bring them to America, but World War I broke out and their town in Ukraine was wiped off the map and he never heard from them again. So this is the sacrifice that my grandfather made in order for me to do this, to be a free American young lady with dreams and goals and pursue what she wanted to. And my father, who came from, that dirt poor family of 10 children, literally, I'm not kidding you, with cardboard on the bottoms of their shoes. I mean, really, he was the only one to even go to college out of 10 children. Not only did he go to college, but he got his PhD. And he was a leader in the American, actually, he got a grant from President Kennedy to help assimilate special education children, mentally retarded kids, and kids with handicaps into better education. So my father had a goal. He had a dream. He wanted the American dream. So there we went from, we were in Illinois, really, really poor, drove cross country in a little tiny, what was it, a little convertible it was going to break down in the back seat. It was just, anyway, so had a beautiful home in Eugene, Oregon, a brand new car. It was a big old Mercury, man. It was like metal and chrome and huge. And my dad felt like a king. He did it. He made it. He achieved the American dream. And so fast forward a little bit. Hey, Dad, I want to go study karate. Well, how did that happen? Obviously, I think I have to say, Bruce Lee was my main, like, yeah, that's what I want to do. Bruce Lee, that is what I want to do. And so I would go to the drive-in movie theaters and I would record like Fist of Fury and Chinese Connection. I'd go home and I'd like, do the sounds that I'd practice.
Mm-hmm.
But I studied Kaja Kempo, and that's well, actually started with Shotokan. I took a class there, and it just clicked. Martial arts for me was not awkward at all. It was like just, I'm not bragging, but meant to be. And
Yeah. Let me ask real quick. Did you play other sports, or did you do anything else?
I did. I was a gymnast.
Okay.
And was on my gymnastics team in high school, and I wasn't great. I was just okay. I but I loved it. I loved the floor exercise, um, event and balance beam. Those were my two specialties.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that? That's kata. That's form. So that's how that translates. And I did some figure skating, but not in competition. But I did compete as a gymnast. So that was my athletic springboard. And when I saw the freedom of movement in the Kajikempo system compared to the Shotokan system, that really attracted me. And so then I sought out, I saw on stage, I went as a white belt to a tournament in San Francisco where I saw on stage Eric Lee and Malia Dacascos Burnell, perform. And when they did their forms on stage, man, that was that. That was it. They were so incredible. And so Eric Lee was the king of kata. Malia was the queen of everything. She had the most trophies, the most wins, the most. She traveled the country. There was no rating system per se. There was a magazine called Professional Karate. It was run by a man named Mike Anderson. And what he did was he just kind of counted people's trophies, and he gave a little more points for people who traveled far away from their home base, people who competed in national tournaments that carried weight. Forms back then were considered the art of martial arts and secondary to the martial part. So it was kind of looked down on, even among the martial arts community. It was like, you want to be a forms champion? Well, how good of a fighter are you?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of attitude.
Right.
When we compare it now, you see what they're doing in forms. Good gracious. Let's see a fighter do what they're doing now.
It's amazing, right? It's amazing. The whole sport karate and extreme martial arts has gone to a whole new level.
Incredible athletes. So back to Mike Anderson and professional karate, that was the only ratings that existed at the time. And he just kind of amassed these points from whoever let him know where they went and whenever, and there was no real solid system. But Malia was the undisputed number one woman. 1974, she traveled all over the country. She had the most trophies. She beat everybody in forms and fighting. She was just the undisputed queen. So I wanted to learn Wun Hop Kuen Do. As soon as I saw Eric Lee and Malia compete, that was it. So told my dad I wanted to move to Colorado. And so I was just a kid. It wasn't even legal. And my dad was the most amazing man. He was so supportive. And he just said, you know what, Karen, I believe in you. And I think it might be a passing phase for you, but I don't ever want you to say, what if? Right. I don't ever want you to have to turn around and go, what if I had did that? What if I had done that or tried, I don't ever want that for you. I want you to do what you feel you're called to do and do the best that you can. and realize if you fail that you've tried your hardest.
Yeah. Now,
So
how long did you train in Shotokan karate?
very briefly, it was just like a 3-month course.
Mm-hmm,
And
and then you moved
yeah,
to
so I
Kajukenbu.
part
And
pardon?
then you moved to Kajukenbu from there.
Yes.
And how long did you train in Kajukenbu?
Before I went to Colorado to train in Wun Hop Kuen Do, well, I earned my green belt. So
Okay.
it was a few years.
Right. Now the Dacascos family, you know, my generation would be Mark Dacascos, because I remember the movie Only the Strong, and I was so mesmerized by that movie. I still to this day make my kids watch that movie, and I show it to, like, when we have a parents' night out at the karate school, you know, the capoeira. It's such a cool movie. But obviously that
Yeah.
was Al's son. So tell me about training
Yeah.
and getting started in that system.
Oh yeah, well I had a lot of stories about Mark. I lived with them for a while. When I had to relocate, I had no place to live, and they were very gracious and let me stay with them. And so Mark was a little kid, and I had a little motorcycle. It was like a Honda CL 175, a little scooter to get around because I couldn't afford a car, and I used to give him rides on the back of my motorcycle and babysit him, and he and Craig, his brother, and have a lot of really great stories and memories about that. And I'll fast forward even more. Malia at that time didn't take me on as a student. Sifu Al, Grandmaster Al Dacascos, was my head instructor, and I trained in Wun Hop Kuen Do. And I really wanted Malia to coach me, but she, like, you know, kind of kept her eye on me, but didn't really acknowledge me. I had to earn it.
Mm-hmm.
I had to prove myself. And one day she came to me and she said, "So you really want to train?" I said, "Yes." She goes, "Well, Sifu Al had told me." He said, "Your forms are so good." He said, "It's really sad that you're not wealthy, because if you could travel the country, you'd be a champion." And that broke me. I mean, that just took the wind out of my sails.
Mm-hmm.
And took me a while to get over, but I did, because I decided I was going to prove to him I would find any way. If he believed in me and thought that that was possible, then nothing was going to stop me. So I made it happen. And Malia came to me and said, "Okay, let's train." And this meant old school training. I mean, she was tough, really tough. And there were times when before they went to Germany, they were in between schools. We didn't have a school. We would be training. She'd train me on a gravel road, and wherever we could. So it was grueling, but it was totally worth it. And then they went to Germany, and I had no school. They were gone, and I was just on the brink of starting to want to compete in the national circuit.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Germany. I got myself there somehow, and I lived there for 3 months, and that's all we did was train. And Christian Wolf was her other form student in Germany. He has a school there. He's now a grandmaster. Christian Wolf. He's amazing. He's still just an amazing athlete, and I have so much respect for him. She would have him and I train together, and she would pit us against one another and say, "Okay, now you pretend like you are at the biggest tournament in the country, and it's between you two. So when you do your form, I want you to go out there and do it as if you're going to win it. So, and if you break for one moment, or I see you slacking, you got to start all over again." And we had to do it 10 times, full pace, as if we were competing, dripping sweat. I mean, we couldn't walk the next. I mean, this is how we train.
Yeah. What was the landscape? What was the landscape of the competition circuit at that time? We're talking about late 70s, early 80s. Is that right?
Yes, it was late 78, 77, 78, 79, 80. Um, it was interesting because there were very few women that competed in form. There were no divisions hardly for women at all. So I was competing against men, as was Malia. Malia was rated in the top 10 among men. Very few women. They didn't have a goal to work for. There were no ratings for women. There often weren't divisions for women in form. I was rated number 6 in the country. Again, we were referred to as girls, and it was kind of forms, and Kata was like, just kind of cute. And I mean, I'm talking about big names. I had to really just keep going, and I just one day I said, I think that more women would compete if they had a goal to work for, because women would come up to me at tournaments and say, we love doing kata forms, but we don't want to compete with men. Really, you think you're going to be number one over men? And I would just encourage them to compete anyway. But I was very bold. I was very young. I just thought, that wrong has to be righted. So I contacted Renato Barton at Karate Illustrated magazine. That was the only rating system at the time. And I had a meeting with him. I took my notebook, and I was just all bound and determined to make a good impression professionally and see what I could do to establish ratings for women. And he said to me, we had the meeting, and he said, I will consider that. He said, your points are incredibly valid. He said, but you're going to have to do a very difficult task. You're going to have to convince the promoters at tournaments to have divisions for women. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, I'll do what I can. And he said, also, you're going to have to start a petition with the women to see if they agree with you. I said, that's no problem. So I did that. And then I had conversations with people like Joe Corley, Larry Carnahan. I mean, people, Ted Kresge at the U.S. Open already had some divisions for women. So he was amazing, man. So I had these conversations, and it took a while. 1979, I was still competing with men, but there were more divisions, and the promoters didn't want to pay for the trophy. The trophy. That's how few women competed. But in the end, the story ended well because the ratings were established in 1979, and I was the first to be rated number 1. Well, I knew I would be, but I knew that more women would start coming out of the walls, coming from nowhere, to beat me, right? Take me down. And that's what I wanted. I wanted that for women. It happened. I held the title in 1980, 79 and 1980. And I'm really proud of that. I'm sure that ratings for women would have been established eventually. Mm-hmm. I don't know when, but I'm glad that I did that push and got it done. And because then right after that, then Inside Kung Fu magazine, Star System, they came out with their ratings in 1980. Mm-hmm. And I was also rated number 1 there too. And then after that, there were more rating systems that popped up all over the country. So, between 1974 and 1975 and 1979, there were no ratings for women.
Now, since you've retired, have you followed the tournament circuit? Are you familiar with who's out there competing now?
I'm not. I really can't tell you. I haven't followed. I've seen some things. I've seen mm-hmm. people competing, but I can't tell you who's who.
Yeah. Well, a few names come to my mind when I think about the women that are competing on the circuit. Since then, obviously we had Cynthia Rothrock who did very well, and then you had Casey Marks who was a really great performer. Into Michelle Krasno was someone that I remember. Now we have Caitlin Deschelle was on the scene for a long, long time, doing really well, and now we have Haley Glass, who's one of the top competitors. So just a few names that come to my mind when I think about the female competitors, and I'm sure I'm missing someone, so I apologize. But you've definitely set the bar and set things in motion for women to be able to have that opportunity to compete and be rated and go on to the next. And what I think is really great is that just inspires the next generation to continue moving forward. And like we said earlier, the extreme martial arts and performance side of martial arts has really stepped up, because back in the day, I think there was, kind of a traditional forms division, but you didn't have a lot of musical and weapons and extreme and all the tricking that happens now. And I think it's great. I think it's awesome to see that there's more to the martial arts than just the forms and the fighting. There's a lot of divisions that people can get out there. And also, you mentioned earlier how your father was, worked with children with, disabled children, kids with handicaps. And now in the tournaments, there's also divisions for students to participate that have a handicap and still can participate in martial arts. And I think that is so amazing as well. I want to talk a little bit, because we're going to run out of time pretty soon here. I want to talk about your movie career, and how did you make the transition from the tournament scene to getting into the movies?
Well, I was invited. It was wonderful. It was at the last tournament, that Mid America Diamond National, where I beat, Cynthia and Belinda and Lori. Those were the three top women of the country. I had gotten a phone call like about 2 weeks before that from Tadashi Yamashita, and he asked me to go to Japan with Eric Lee and co-star in this film called Shinobi Ninja. And I was like so excited. Are you kidding? So I was on an airplane with Eric Lee, and my father had given me a letter to read on the airplane. And so I opened it, and he was telling me how proud he was of me, that I had pursued and, followed my dreams and tried my hardest. And he was just probably really shocked that I was on a plane to Japan to make a movie. But so that's how that all started. And I was bit by the bug, laying there in 8 feet of snow in the mountains of Japan, waiting for them to change up the camera setting, and I had no stand-in. It was really low budget, and I was loving it. I was just digging it. I was like, I love this so much. So that was it. I just moved to LA and said, that's it. I'm going to start taking acting classes. I'm going to focus on that art, which is completely a whole new art, and see where it takes me. And from there, I had a lot of great jobs. I traveled the world, and I look back, and it was just incredible.
And what's neat is it all started with martial arts, right? And it all started with a dream and something that you really wanted to do. And you mentioned that your father wrote you a letter and just telling you how proud. I mean, I'm a father, and I can't tell you, when I see my kids doing what they love, living their dreams, succeeding in life. I mean, there's no better thing for any parent is to see them live their dreams. And I was fortunate enough too, that when I was a teenager, I fell in love with martial arts, and I said, one day I'm going to open a karate school. I'm going to be a martial arts instructor. And nobody that I knew, they're like, no way, you can never do that. You can never make money doing that. My parents were super supportive. By the time I was a late teenager, I had met my future wife at that time, who became my girlfriend. And, she supported it. And it's like, to look back and know that a dream, it all started with a dream, that it paid off, and that you can do a lot more things in life. And like you, the martial arts led to the movies, led to being on television series, led to all of the things that you've accomplished in your life. Tell me a little bit more about moving from movies to TV.
Well, again, it was an invitation. The first television, I think, what was the first? Was Hercules: The Legendary Journeys, and I played the role of the enforcer. And the producer of that show was Rob Tapert, and he was a martial arts fan, and he had seen a couple of my films, and he knew who I was, and basically wrote the role for me. And I didn't know that. My manager called me and she said, "Oh, you have an audition at Universal Studios for Hercules," and I hadn't even seen the show. And so I caught up and watched a few shows, and I went to the audition thinking that I was going to get sides, which are a couple pages of script to read and, audition. But I walked into the room, and sitting in a circle was the entire crew, from Rob Tapert, the producer, to the director, and all of the other producers and writers. And so I sit down, and he introduces me, and he gets right to it. And he says, "So Karen, when you get to New Zealand, how do you feel about that scene by the beach where you're nude?" And I went, well, and I was like, I couldn't talk. Something else carried me through that, because I was going inside my head, I got this job. But I had to act like I was like, yeah, I got this job.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, of course, I wasn't fully nude, but practically. But we had the discussion about the script, and that was it. I had the job. It was just incredible. And I did that series, and my manager let every martial arts school know in the country that I was going to be on, so that we could help boost the ratings. And it worked, because back then they had the, what do you call it, the little box top on the sets, the Nielsen ratings.
Yep.
And so it got the highest ratings ever for the entire series. And wow, that's a really cool thing. So that was a fun story. But, I got to go back, Jason, and I just really want to say, I've had so many amazing experiences and worked with so many amazing people, and even currently. And I go, yeah, I had tenacity, and did I get handed down drive and determination from my grandfather, from my father, who persevered through so much adversity? Did me being bullied make me tough? What is it that drove me? What is it that made me keep going through? And I've had a lot of, you say it's very easy to judge on social media and in magazines. You shouldn't do that with anybody, because you don't know what they're going through personally. And I've had a lot of hardships. It has not been an easy road. Nothing's been easy for me. But I now know that this person who achieved all these things always was with God. God was always with her and guiding her and giving her strength. And I didn't know that until 2 years ago. And I can look back on every incident in my life, and I now know that he was with me. So I give all the glory and all the praise to my God, Jesus Christ.
Amen. Amen. Now, if you don't mind, if we get a little bit personal, what changed? What changed 2 years ago? What made you find Christ?
Truth. I was digging for truth. I knew that things were, with the whole situation, I'm not even going to say it what it was. I know, everybody knows. I knew that we were not being given truth. You know, when I grew up, it was like Huntley and Brinkley and Walter Cronkite and these great old newscasters, and what they said was true. That was true, and that's what we relied on. Well, now we can't do that. And what happened a couple of years ago um, made me start digging for truth, because I realized that what I was seeing in the mainstream was not, that I was being fed an agenda. This is just me, and this is just what I felt. So I started digging and digging and digging, and I would sit down after absorbing as much information as I could, and I would close my eyes and I would soak it in, and I would open my heart and come to my own decision as to what I thought was true. Well, what did Jesus say? Open your heart, not your mind. But I had been telling people that I was doing this. Other people who wanted to know, have answers, I would tell them, you know what? Do some homework and then sit down, close your eyes, and open your heart and make your own decisions. You'll find truth. This is before I answered the call from God. I didn't know that that was God doing that, giving me that message. So along the way, I started meeting people that were had a lot of faith and invited me to their churches, and I started I just kept my heart open. And I had never read the Bible. I wasn't raised with faith. I was told, when you grow up, you decide for yourself if there's God or not. I was, God bless my dad. I love him so much. But he was an educator. It was somewhat liberal household of educators and the circles that we moved in. So religion wasn't spoken about ever. That's something you didn't talk about at the dinner table with other people in order to keep the conversation on an even keel. So 2 years ago, we'll say spring 2 years ago, I found a family. I found a church family that is incredible and amazing, and things just started happening for me that I can't explain. That would be a whole other podcast, Jason.
We may have to do it.
I mean, it was just like bam, bam, bam. Every time I set out to do something, and I was volunteering and helping people, I was winning. And there is no other explanation for that other than God had his hand on me and was guiding me. Because if you would have told me 3 years ago, oh, Karen, you're going to be talking about Jesus Christ, and you're going to be believing in him, and you're going to be sharing his word, and you're going to be reading the Bible and studying it, I would have said, okay, you got to tell me about this, because there's no way I can even comprehend how that's going to happen. So I just tell people to open their hearts. That's what Jesus did. I mean, if you doubt something, do your own homework and just listen to your heart, because that is where truth lives. You have to learn how to do it, and you have to be open to it. I could talk about this all day, Jason. So you drive this bus.
Yeah. Well, no, I love that you bring this up, and in the last couple of years, a lot of things have changed. And going back further, you talked about growing up in a household where, religion wasn't talked about, finances weren't talked about, who you voted for wasn't talked about. Well, all of that has changed in the last couple of years. I mean, you're either on this side or you're on that side. it's very rare that people can be somewhere in the middle, which I think is such a shame, right? Because wherever we sit, we are all human. We are all brothers and sisters, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
and so we don't need to get too deep into to preaching here, but I mean, I grew up in a home where we believed in Christ and we were a Christian family, but I didn't go to church. I didn't read the Bible. As a matter of fact, I wasn't even baptized until my daughter, a couple months after my daughter was baptized Catholic. I found the Catholic faith and have been with it ever since. And I have a really great friend who I do a podcast with every Tuesday, our Tuesday Thoughts with Danny Cleary, who happens to be a youth pastor, a youth minister at our Holy Cross Catholic Church. And we bring up topics and we talk about how, different word, every week goes with that. But you don't hear people talk about it because it's like, I don't know, it's just so controversial. And I don't know why everything has to be so controversial, especially with the politics. You're right. I mean, we've been fed so many lies, and so much agenda has been like crammed down our throat. And you made it very beautiful. You just said, open your heart and make your decision what feels right to you. And so for anybody watching, maybe just take a minute just to focus in on that for just a second and see how things may change in your perspective, because I think that's important.
I love that. You said it very well. Things are happening in a frenzy right now. And Jason, it is no different than it was over 2,000 years ago. It was no different than it was 4,000 years ago. All of the trials that Abraham went through, that Moses, it's happening now. It's just, you can read that Bible and relate to what is happening now, and there is absolutely no difference. And we are called by Christ to speak up and stand up for him. And you must make a choice. And for people who don't understand that, I'm very sorry. I proudly and gratefully stand up for Jesus Christ, and I will proclaim him and give him all glory any chance that I get. And I thank you, Jason, for allowing me to do that, because that's what we are supposed to do, and that's what he has commanded, and that is what is happening now. I believe that he is in the process of separating those who are believers from unbelievers, and you've got to make a decision. And he said, be ready at any time. You don't know the hour. You will never know. You'll never know when I will be back. And so we always have to be ready, and we always have to help others open their hearts to him. And so that's the most important thing. And that's what I'm doing. If people don't care for that, I'm very sorry, but that's what I'm going to continue to do. But I'm also going to, live my life and support martial artists and help other people. Like you said, how you're inspired to help other people. Well, that's a gift given to you, Jason. And, thank God for that.
And I do every day. I thank God for the gifts that I'm given to be in the position that I'm in, to host this podcast and showcase and highlight you and allow you to talk about your faith and my children, my family, my martial arts school, and everything that I've been blessed with. Again, all glory to God all day, every day. Amen to that. Right.
Amen.
Well, listen, we are at the end of our time, and I think we closed it with a great topic. So I'm so happy that I had you on the show. If you could hang out for just about 60 seconds so we could have a chat before we go. I want to remind everybody to please continue to watch the podcast. Follow us here on Master Motivation Podcast on YouTube, also on Facebook, Instagram, and everywhere else. Guys, go out and make it a great day. Open your hearts, as Karen has said today, and find your truth. Enjoy the day. Be blessed.
Bye.